called Looking for a Place to Call Home, here at the African LGBTQ plus refugee migrants pre-conference. My name is Daniel. I'm the founder of Living for UK. Living for UK is an organization that supports and validates the lived experiences of LGBTQ plus Africans, people seeking asylum and refugees in the UK. I'm also the founder of the Cool Off Zone. The Cool Off Zone is a club on Clubhouse, which is a safe space for queer Africans. Here tonight, well, not tonight, today, this afternoon, it's afternoon here in London, where I'm joining from. I'll be joined by incredible members of the panel, and together, we're going to be having an open and honest conversation, ranging from history to struggles, but also unpacking what it means to be an asylum seeker in the context of the African queer society and environment. So without further ado, I'll just like for us to kick off. And I have Annie Marie. So these are campaigners and activists and asylum seekers themselves, who I believe have the range and the lived experience to share their lives with us, educate us. So sit tight and you're here for a ride. I have Annie Marie, I have Gilbert, I have Talent and Tiara. So without further ado, I will be going to each of the panelists to introduce themselves, because I know they only can do justice to who they are and what they do. And so Annie Marie, over to you.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, go on.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nalugwa and Mary Josephine, a lesbian from Uganda and an asylum seeker in Kenya. I'm a human rights defender. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Annie Marie. Great to have you here. Gilbert.
Hello, everyone. It's very exciting to be part of this panel and part of this international conference, looking for a place to call home, reclaiming our past and defining our future. I am an international LGBTQ activist. I also double as an asylum seeker in Kenya, also a leader of the queer community in Kakuma. So the three coats, I'll be wearing all of them today. And I hope they can be informative of what the conference is trying to achieve. Great to be part of this.
Thank you, Gilbert, and it's lovely to have you here. I will move on to Talent. Hello, Talent. Talent, are you there?
Yes, how are you? Can you hear me now?
Yes. I think it was breaking earlier, but yeah.
Okay. I'm Talent Makanga. I'm an asylum seeker in South Africa. And I'm also an Anglican priest and also a human rights activist.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Talent. Again, great to have you here. And last but certainly not least, Tiara. Hi, Tiara.
Hey, Daniel, how are you? Hey, everyone. This is Tiara. I go by she, her pronouns. I am a human rights defender and transgender activist, originally from Zimbabwe, but currently living in the US, where I'm serving with BLMP, which stands for Black LGBTQI plus Migrant Project. Excited to be here.
Thank you. Thanks to all my panelists. So let us get into this. My first question. I think obviously a lot of us would want to know, even though it's something some of us have, done our research and we've known the work, I think it'd be important to have these conversations time and time again. How are African LGBTQ plus people criminalized in our home countries? Like what are the root causes? Let's take it back. Like, why do we even have to seek asylum in the first place? Why should someone have to flee their home country where they should feel safe, they should feel comfortable? So how did we get here? Ciara, I'm going to put you on the spot. If you want to go first.
Thank you for putting me on the spot. Oh Lord, it's always not a good place to start first, but okay. So yeah, I think it really plays out in so many ways, right? And specifically the one that I would like to focus on is how our home countries have played on the fear factor of what LGBTQ people are, right? Because when you look at most African countries, people get to hear about what gay people are from other people, and very few people really know a gay person like in person and personally. So religion and politics have really played a big part through the messaging that they have put out to the masses. If we're to talk about religion, you see how gay people are demonized, right? And they overplay that in churches, in sermons, and that further pushes the narrative that we are not acceptable, we are not normal, we are sick in the head, which further pushes us out of communities that we reside in. And when it comes to politics as well, they have also often played the Western idea, right? Being gay is a Western idea. And I used to laugh in Zimbabwe when they were campaigning. They would tell people that if you're not careful, if you vote for the opposition party, they're going to bring white men to come and marry your husbands and your sons, right? So they've really played out the fear. They've put fear in people to not want to get close to us, to not want to understand us and know that we're actually normal, everyday human beings. And that's what really leads to the criminalization. Like, for example, in Zimbabwe, right? What is criminalized when it comes to LGBTQ people is what they consider same-sex physical conduct, right? And that can be interpreted in so many different ways. And that's really one specific way that is really criminalized, but also because the broader majority of Zimbabwe does not understand the constitution, what it really criminalizes, it's just translated to just being LGBTQ in Zimbabwe is criminalized, which further pushes on the harassment that comes on to the queer people in Zimbabwe.
No, thank you. Thank you, Tiara. I think takeaway there for me, it's the dehumanization of queer individuals, right? And that's what influences the fear factor. Because 9 times out of 10, when cishet people meet a queer person, I think there's this orientation or disorientation that, oh, actually, this is a human being. Yeah. Obviously, because the propaganda, homophobia sells in politics anyway. So it makes sense, and that stops people from getting to know us, and then we're dehumanized, and then our lives are put in danger. Well said. Thank you so much. I want to go to talents. Talents, how would you approach this question? Why are we here? Why are we having to flee our home countries? That we should feel safe.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you so much. I'll talk from my own experience, really. There is a lot of rejection from our own people, like what Tiara has mentioned. In Zimbabwe, people don't actually know what the Constitution says and what our culture says as well, and our laws. So you find it's very difficult for most of us who are LGBTIQ to survive in such an environment where everyone utters hate words and there's a lot of discrimination towards LGBTIQ community. It's a challenge really in our own time. I've experienced young people committing suicide, some being abandoned by their families, and some ended up in different countries because we don't have a place to call home. We don't have families that can accept us as we are. And it becomes a challenge for us to survive outside the country.
Yeah, no, well said, talents. And I think that something you said around culture, which brings me to misinformation. Hopefully something Gilbert and Annie Mary could probably shed a light on. This idea that being queer is an African, I don't know, I'm sure you you probably have heard it. And homophobes or transphobes use that to, they weaponize that so much. It's not a culture, you know. And when I came out to my mom, God, I remember her saying, "Oh, but I thought being gay was a white thing." You know, this whole idea, well, no, actually, being queer is African. And homophobia was actually imported because back in our history, if you truly know the African culture, you would know that to be queer is to be an African person. So I don't know what Annie Mari has to say on that, obviously in relation to the original question, but I think that point around culture that Talent mentioned was very, very crucial. Hi, Annie Mari.
Hi. Thank you. Thank you. It's a pleasure, honestly, to be part of this, because it is very important to us. This is who we are. But now, like relating to my country, I come from Uganda. The bill was out in 2013, which was like homosexuality. It was life sentence, life imprisonment, you know? But what for? Because this is what I want, because this is what I feel for someone? No. But all this starts from, yeah, as we all know, the African culture, the African norms. It is supposed to be, a man is supposed to get married to a woman is supposed to get married to a man. You said that people say that it is important. It is not. People used to be there, but because of these cultures, they like get scared of coming out. Some say, what will people say? Others definitely, if the community, even though it is a rumor, that is enough to put your life in grave danger. It sounds weird. We look in Uganda, in fact, for nowadays, they see it is an unnatural behavior. That is what they call it. But someone human, how can you say that something is unnatural? So it's like we are not real. We do not exist. That is how it is. And that is how people are terming it to be. But we are real. And this is who we are. What they need is just to accept. But because of the religious beliefs and the African norms and all that, because even they say in Uganda that they have to criminalize these people so that they rescue the young generation. So it means that kids are going to grow up knowing that such a person is so bad, is evil. That is how we are termed to be. So this is why we tend to face all this that we are going through, the homosexuality, the homophobia that we are everywhere, wherever we go. Yes, I flew from Uganda to Kenya, but it seems even where I am, it tends to be worse. It tends to be worse. Even the authority, everyone who welcomed you, they look at you as evil, saying as that you were not that in your country. Why do you want to bring it here? Spoiling our kids. But how? Honestly. Yeah, it's the culture and the religious beliefs that are trying, and they are like trying to stop the awareness, stopping people to, because activists have come out. I think they have helped a lot, but still there are those hinders that people do their best, the political, whatever's, the religious, they do their best to put hinders that people are not supposed to know about this. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. No, Annie Mary, well, passionately said. It is sad because we know who we are. Like this is, and when people try to call being queer a choice, that pisses me off as well. You know, like who just wakes up to, I mean, oh, I'm going to get rejected today, and I want to face racism or homophobia. I think also, I also think part of our confidence in our identities, I don't know, triggers their own fragility. So I've sort of said, again, homosexuality is African, homophobia is Western. That's my mentality right now. And anyone who um, says any different because of your religion, you are the problem, right? Because I know of religious people who are not homophobic. But I think that point you made around kids is an important one. And I think for me, I think part of the reasons I would say why I suffered from internalized homophobia was because growing up, I didn't see anyone who looked like me, who I could talk to. There was no, I don't know, gay uncle that could help me. And I had internalized every negativity about being queer. So I hated myself, right? And if only people understand the power of visibility, like raising awareness about LGBT issues doesn't mean your kid will be gay. If anything, I should be straight because listen, heteronormativity was plastered in my face all through. So it doesn't work that way. It just means if your child is queer, you know, they know to love themselves enough that they are valid. Or if they're not queer, they know to respect people who are different from them. So it's a win-win, but obviously, because of homophobia, they just won't get it. But we know who we are. And I think that self-validation is very, very important. So I'll go lastly to Gilbert, and then I'll move to the next question for time. Hi, Gilbert.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you. I think colleagues have really covered this, but maybe something I wanted to highlight is that, you see, with the repeated inculcation from the fundamentalists, and here we are not talking about basically just the religious, we also have the culture. These cultural institutions have also done a lot of damage, you know, in inculcating these myths that we are demonized, as Tiara put it. When you have institutions that are upholding cultures that they have adopted from the Western world and killing their own for cultures that we lived with in peace long before, you know, European colonization, it's very sad. Then you add to this the mushrooming laws that are very harsh, that are perpetrated to intimidate, to persecute, to criminalize us. As a result of these laws, now you have the masses taking the law into their hands. Recently, a couple of young men were murdered in cold blood in Uganda on suspicion that they are gay. And we have similar attacks in Kenya. The law has created a room of laxity. People think that attacking an LGBTQ is a service to the government and its laws. It's very sad. It's not just about criminalizing. It's also the liberty that they have given the people, you know, to perform these extrajudicial executions. So this is how we have gotten to this point, Daniel.
Yeah, it's yeah. What can I say? I mean, that point around people justifying harming another person, like a fellow human being, and you think you're doing well. Yeah, we see that in Nigeria as well. I mean, Nigeria has like this 14-year, obviously rubbish bill, right? That needs to be repealed. I think it must be very difficult, you know, as a queer person in Africa, having to face the state violence, but also the social violence as well. You know, not only are you not protected by the law, but socially your life is a danger. Like you couldn't go to the police if you experience a hate crime, because the police is probably homophobic anyway, and they will try to justify that violence towards you. No, thank you all. I think we've done justice to question one, you know, giving us context as to, you know, why some of us obviously feel the need to flee our countries for safety, our home countries that we should call home and feel safe. Moving on to the next question, seeking asylum. what issues do we face during the asylum process? I know some of the members of the panelists are currently seeking asylum. Who should I put on the spot next? It was Tiara. I will go to Annie-Marie. The spirit is telling me to come to you. So, Annie-Marie, are you there? Okay, Gibbert.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, go on.
Oh, the challenges. Hectic. That is what I should tell you. Because you leave your country when you feel you're going to be safe in a country where anyone will be able to welcome you. But unfortunately, now talking with experience, unfortunately, where I came, it is even worse. It is worse.
Wow.
That the authorities who are responsible for your protection, they don't even care at all. But my thinking is that it is because I'm who I am. Because you cannot tell me I go to the police to report my case, I've been attacked, and then you tell me the problem you refused to change. You can, it's like I'm accused of what I am.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm being accused of who I am. Meaning, so they like, you need to change. You're a woman. A woman is supposed to have a man who said so. Said so. So I'm supposed to stand or to live my life the way people want me to. I cannot stand for myself. I can't be myself. I don't have rights over myself. You welcomed me. You accepted that you're going to protect me. And then unless you insult me, you accuse me and all that. It is hectic when it comes to asylum process. I would like my colleague Gilbert to add on that because we've been in this struggle together. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you. Yeah, let's just move straight to Gilbert. That's just traumatic. Gilbert, please go.
Daniel, I think when it comes to the challenges, this is a very, very huge area. You see, there are the challenges that they will tell you, for example, if you are COC Netherlands and you're calling UNHCR or the Kenyan government, there are challenges that they will tell, for example, PAI. Things like we are underfunded. Things like we are understaffed. You know, we are overwhelmed with numbers. In actual sense, these in themselves are not challenges. They become challenges when there is false advertising. What do I mean by false advertising? You see, in the whole of East Africa, Kenya has opened its borders to persons fleeing persecution on the basis of their sexual orientation and gender identity. So what are they advertising? In the very definition of the word asylum lies protection. Protection is what asylum means. Now, the Kenyan government is well aware that the Kenyans, the majority of the Kenyans, do not want the LGBTQ. This is reflected in their constitution. They have laws that criminalize us, that subject us to long sentences. But with this knowledge, they say, yes, we know you cannot live in Uganda, you cannot live in Burundi, you cannot live in where, come. So by us saying that we are offering asylum, they're advertising protection for the LGBTQ that are fleeing violence. Now, when you reach, for example, in Kenya, there are absolutely no mechanisms that take into account and protect the LGBTQ. despite them being put in close proximity with a range of African non-LGBTQ refugees, with the kind of violence that they have fleeing from. So when we get to the camp, what was advertised is not there. There is no protection. As they give out housing, there is no consideration for the LGBTQ. They put you anywhere in the camp. When there are attacks, there is no mechanism to give you protection. Now, what has been advertised is actually not being offered. Now, that's why the delays in the processing of resettlement become a problem. That is why living in a camp becomes a problem. And then they will come and tell you that, look, you are supposed to be in the camp because the law says so. We are aware of what the law says. There is a law that says we should be in prison for 14 to 25 years. Why are we not in prison? So why should the law be picked selectively? So the challenge does not lie in the slow processing per se. The challenge lies in the lack of mechanisms to protect the LGBTQ. And that's just one. The other challenge lies in the interests that are tailored to the LGBTQ refugee process. Now, some of these interests, you will not find them in the press or by contacting these institutions. When you come to them, yes, they'll tell you the normal challenges. They will give you cold, unsympathetic answers. But for us who are in the camp, they tell us that, look, you have just arrived in Kenya. We can't let you go. You have not attracted enough financial value for us. So it means now that the security and the protection of the LGBTQ refugees has taken a secondary place. Now, the challenge with this is that when the LGBTQ are under attack, there will be serious efforts to make this look as though it's not serious. There will be serious efforts to convince the world that would be concerned that, look, you're overreacting. And this effort does not stop at the institutions that are operating these camps. We have had people who have come as allies, and they have turned out to be false allies. I can tell you, Daniel, that we have people who have said, for example, that the LGBTQ are very few who have problems. The LGBTQ are not having real problems. There is no homophobia in Kakuma. They have said that, you see, they are not even LGBTQ. We have lost 5 LGBTQ individuals in a space of 1 year. And all the years that we have spent fighting for the liberation of the LGBTQ, I can't believe that we are still discussing whether there exists homophobia in Kakuma or not, or anywhere in Africa for that matter. You see, these narratives are part of the system that is designed, to serve these interests that are tied to the refugee process. Now, these false friends have even presented themselves as authorities. They have encouraged people that if you want to understand what is really happening in Kakuma, talk to us. This is very sad. What would qualify, for example, an organization in the US to tell the story of a refugee in Kakuma better than that refugee? What could possibly qualify that person? So it has become a political issue. But I can tell you, Daniel, that this has created an enormous challenge. First of all, the refugees are not able to rally support from organizations that would naturally give them support. They are busy discussing narratives. Are they LGBTQ? Are they even in problems? 5 people buried. Is that not really enough? And yet we focus on, is Gilbert gay? Is Anne-Marie gay? These narratives have been presented to take us off the real issues. If you took a trip to Kakuma, would you find special protection places for the attacked? Have you tasked, for example, the institution responsible on which guidelines apply when LGBTQ refugees are under attack? All these pertinent issues have been pushed aside. And we are focusing on very superficial narratives. Are they gay? Are they dying? Yes, we are dying. 5 are already in the ground, including a minor. So these politics that have attracted false allies has made it incredibly challenging for the refugees who are seeking a place to call home to get any meaningful support. We are losing people. I don't know any place where the LGBTQ are dying or have been attacked to the extent that we have seen in Kakuma. And yet we are working backwards, trying to understand if homophobia still exists. Wow. So that has been a very big challenge, Daniel, and it has resulted in these other challenges. Delayed processes, people dying, the risk of the people going sent down there is increasing, So it lies within which interests have been tied to our process. They are the reasons for the delay. But this can be found out if we listen to the victims.
Thank you. Yeah, Gabriel, thank you. That was, I felt every passion in everything you said, and I think the point around false allyship is very harmful, people speaking for asylum seekers or refugees without asylum seekers or refugees, and almost benefiting off our struggles. That's a different level of harm, because you're giving a different narrative, possibly giving misinformation at the expense of the realities and struggles of the victims. I don't think there's anything else I could have added to that. Tiara, and then we'll go to talents. Then we'll go to the last question. Hello, Tiara. Yeah, I think Gilbert and Annie Maria go on.
Sure. So I think the process of seeking asylum in the US is just terrible, like anywhere else in the world, right? And I love the statement that Gilbert said, to say what is being advertised is not being offered. And I often talk about that to say, when you are outside of the US and you're a queer person, right? Especially if you're in a country that criminalizes your existence, you often think of America as the mecca of freedom. You can go there and be who you are and be embraced and celebrated, but only to get here as an asylum seeker and you realize the reality on the ground is actually quite different. And there's a few hurdles that you really have to go through, right? So when you first get here and you have to, or at least when you have first applied for your asylum, there's a whole waiting period that you have to wait, right? And that period is not named. There is no timeline to it. There are some people who've been here for over 8 years, they've applied their asylum and they've not had any feedback back. So they're still in line waiting. I've been here 5 years, I'm still in line waiting with no hope of knowing when will I get a response. So there's really no time frames of knowing when will you even, get processed or be able to be in front of somebody to really know what's happening with your case. And while you're waiting, they've also done a good job to make sure that you can be able to apply for a work authorization and you can start going to work and also be able to pay taxes. But when it comes to the treatment of your person as a human being, as a normal or equal citizen in this country, it's pretty difficult. Even when you look at the process of applying for work authorization itself, there's 6 months period to wait until you get it. And now with the process always changing, you could be waiting for longer. So when you first get here and you have to do something to survive and to work, all the options that you are left with that you can actually make money off are all illegal, right? So for the trans community, for the most part, you would have to resort to doing sex work while you're waiting for your work authorization. You can't do that because that's also illegal. And when you find people who are like, okay, we have a small business, we want to employ you without your papers, they cannot do that. That's illegal. So you are really left to be in this place of just like not knowing what will happen. And also another major challenge is just the deportation here in this country. There is so much of it, and it's something that they really thrive on, and they try to make sure that they send people back home, or at least they'll hold you in detention centers for as long as they can. Because again, that's also a whole structure of its own that also has its own benefits to the country and the people who actually own those institutions. So another one of the things that we've been fighting really is just trying to get our folks out of the immigration detention centers, which has also been proving to be really difficult, because once people are in immigration detention centers, you cannot guarantee that somebody is going to have access to healthcare. Right? You could have pre-existing conditions, you've been taking your medications from home, but once you get into that structure, it's not guaranteed that you will have access to that. And if you are one of the blessed people that will be able to be fought for and you're released temporarily, for some people, now they have a new system of surveillancing people that they release temporarily. So now you have to wear an ankle bracelet, like they do when people, if you're on home arrest. So they are able to see where you are, and you have marked perimeters of how far long you can go from your home. You have scheduled times that you have to check in. So all these ways of surveillance are really just like, there's so much policing on Black queer immigrant bodies, right? So those are all things that we are striving to fight for, because when you look back, like also I think somebody else said this, when you look back at your reality that made you leave your home country and you're coming to seek safety here, when you really look back at it, you'll be like, oh my goodness, this is actually worse than where I was. Not that you have to compare trauma or oppression, but it does really feel like it sometimes. So those are some of the challenges that we are facing currently.
That point around, and I think Anne-Marie mentioned it at the start. You leave your home country out of fear, and you're seeking protection, right? And to be humanized. Yeah. And then you get to where you're supposed to feel safe, and you're almost feeling worse. And your point around endlessly waiting in limbo, and the impact that does to one's life, because as humans, we want to be able to plan and forecast to say in the next 2 years, I want to do this, I want to go to school, I want to do that. Yeah. And having a process that just puts all of that on hold indefinitely is just unimaginable. And I like this, your perspective around the US, because obviously, although, there are conversations to be had around privileges with location, seeking asylum in the UK and the US, but there still are struggles. Yeah, like the US in itself isn't just because it's America doesn't mean it's all lovey-dovey, smooth. And I know seeking asylum here in the UK, because living for UK, and I work with asylum seekers, and it just gives you first-hand experience. And let's not talk about the mental health impact or what it must have meant for people seeking asylum in a pandemic. I mean, without pandemic in itself is awful, right? And then you not add that to it, and being the loneliness, the isolation, and I think all these conversations, are not really exclusive to locations. So thank you very much, Sarah, for that point.
Yeah, if I can also just add one more thing quickly to say, I don't want to paint this picture and say there's no other privileges that you can get to enjoy, right? Specifically speaking to my own personal story, I wasn't able to transition back in Zimbabwe, but I was able to transition here. So there is some benefits, but also to say there is more to my life than just me being able to transition. There's so much there's so many aspects of me that I want to thrive in and be able to be a successful person. And if those things are not set up in a way that allows me to thrive in those things, then we have an issue, right? And also I think Gilbert also mentioned this to say, the whole process, after you go through all these hurdles, at the end of the day, at the end of the process, you still have to get in front of an immigration officer and be able to convince someone that you really are gay, you really are trans.
What does that even mean? Convincing someone,
right? Because that's how they measure if they're going to give you asylum or not. You have to answer all these questions. You have to tell them your life story, and then it's left up to the person who interviewed you to say, do I really believe that you're gay? Do I really believe that your life in danger? If they feel like they don't, that's it for you. So there's no guarantee that you will get it at the end.
Yeah, no, great point. Before we move quickly and then go to the last question, I think that point I really, really want to reiterate, because it is important, because on this panel we're so diverse, location, experiences, nationality. I think having a nuanced conversation about the privileges we bring to the table, as well as our struggles. I think it really helps us listen and empathize, without dismissing anyone else's struggle, right? So as someone seeking asylum in the UK, there is a privilege that comes with that, like you said, in the US. And I think knowing that privilege allows, someone like myself to empathize with an asylum seeker in an African country, as well as expecting them to obviously listen to my struggle, even though I'm seeking asylum in the UK or the US. I think that really, really works well. Thank you, Tiara. Okay, let's go to talent. And I'll go to our last question because I know there are questions from our audience. Guys, chill, we'll come to you. All right, talent, please go.
Thank you so much. Honestly speaking, I don't even know if the process of seeking an asylum still exists in South Africa. People have been taking advantage, or I can simply say the government have been taking advantage of COVID-19. You'll find that ever since I came to South Africa, the Home Affairs have been closed up to this day. And for someone who is coming in a country seeking for a safer place, then you just live without proper documents. Life has not been easy. The only solution that you are left with right now is either you become a sex worker or you commit suicide. Because if you try to look for employment elsewhere, they will require proper documents, of which most of us don't have such. I don't know really if there are organizations or other people who can help us in that issue. The Home Affairs has caused a lot of damage to members of our community. I personally, I tried to seek employment sometimes, even in the church actually rejected to give me a worker's license because I don't have proper documents. And I tried to approach the Home Affairs, then they told me the Home Affairs is closed. And I left with no solution. I don't even know what to do. This has been a challenge of our own time. We don't have a home, we don't have employment, and life becomes hell.
Wow. Thank you for sharing your experience, talent. And I really, really hope our next question hopefully would shed some ray of hope. This is experience that we've shared. And obviously, even who knows who is watching, who's listening, that can, be of help in whatever way and however they can, to make the lives of people seeking asylum, LGBTQ plus Africans, easier. Thank you, talent. Last question. In what ways are we resisting and organizing to keep our community safe? So I think we've come from, context, history, and we've come from, sharing our current realities, the struggles, our experiences. It's a bit of something for the future, right? And to prefer solutions, shall we say. How are we resisting and organizing to keep our community safe? How are we building? I would go to Gilbert.
Daniel, thank you so much. That's a very, very big question. And unfortunately, it's not one that we can answer by ourselves. You see, we shall give the answer and also what would be the ideal answer. Now, the answer is that, for example, what is happening in East Africa is that we are trying to create awareness. We are trying to raise our voices above this politics, that says, for example, East Africa is safe, it has no homophobia. The narratives that, try to tell people that, look, this is an ACT UP, the refugees are looking for financial assistance. These problems that we're talking about, refugees being, made to believe that they will be safe in a safe second country, only to find that it's worse than the country where they ran from. These are the reasons why you have people committing suicide. Because why should I come from, for example, Burundi to come and commit suicide in Kenya? Why can't I commit it in Burundi? It means I had hope when I was coming, and this hope has been extinguished. Now, when this happens, then you have suicide. So how do we, rally to protect these communities? Yes, this needs the support of everybody. The best we can do in our circumstances, those that are in the refugee and asylum seeking process, is to tell the stories of what happens. Now, I know there are a lot of institutions that have been formed, among other reasons, to create change. These ones will come in form of human rights organizations, they will come in form of LGBT organizations and other organizations that have been created to create change. This is an opportunity and a challenge, I think, to you. This organizing cannot happen without your support. I know the politics that these institutions put in place has created a bit of doubt in your hearts. But I think if you have worked with African LGBTQ communities, then you know that homophobia is still rife, that attacks based on homophobia, transphobia, and xenophobia are actually happening. I think the potential that lies within all these organizations is enormous and could help in keeping these communities safe. I'm afraid, Daniel, this one I will not hide. This potential is being underutilized. Most of the people that would engineer this kind of change are either engaging in a peripheral sense or standing on the sidelines and watching. I think we need everybody who has set out to fight for change and improve conditions for the sexual minorities to rise. This is the time. I think the African LGBTQ movement has struggled for long because of these kinds of politics. We have been very ineffective. That's why we end up running away from Africa to other places where we can live in peace. We have not challenged the status quo back home. And we continue to play with the same politics. I think it's time to stand for what is right, for what is fair, to stand with those that need our help. If you had to choose who to give the benefit of the doubt, would it be a refugee or an institution taking care of the refugee? Who would you give the benefit of doubt? If a refugee says, I'm suffering homophobia, and an institution says they are not suffering homophobia, in Africa, who would make more sense? You see, we have all these answers. So we are calling on institutions, individuals, and political elements to make this fight substantive. It's very, very empty. It's a sham in most areas. We are just comfortable talking about it, but we are not willing to go to the extra mile and challenge and demand accountability. I think your very existence and your purpose of existence puts you in a pole position to demand accountability, to demand for protection. You are there as defenders. I think it's time that we saw more defending from institutions to get proactive. Let's move on from the elementary. Is homophobia existing? No, we know that. What are the guidelines? What is happening? Why is this not happening? Let's take interest. And for God's sake, please listen to the experiences of the victims. Do not look at the accused and allow him to be the judge. It's very unprofessional and ethical for the accused, again, to play the judge. If somebody has been accused of failing in their duties, I think you should approach this with an open mind. Listen to both sides. Then you will see the world of horror, the world of pain, the world of death that exists in the refugee camps. The onus is on us to do everything it takes to protect our communities, and the others will join us along the way. Thank you, Danny.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Listen to those with the lived experience, to refugees and asylum seekers, migrants. Thank you. That was a huge takeaway. Tiara, hello again.
Hey. Hey, Al. So yeah, thank you for that very important question on how are we resisting. I can definitely speak to the power of coming together, finding your tribe and coming together. And I'll speak about this in the context of the existence of BLMP, which is the organization that I'm with, right? Because for BLMP to be created, there was an identification to say, okay, there is a need for representation, like you said earlier on, representation matters. Because we realize that within the USA narrative of what queer immigration looks like, most of it is heavily leaning on Latino and Spanish-speaking folks as the main focus of what immigration looks like, but there was not really much of a shine of a light on what does Black queer migration looks like. So that's when, you know, people came together and said, hey, we need to fill in this gap and change the narrative so that our own experiences, all these experiences can be highlighted and we can put a face to our issues. And that's how BLMP was created, right? So what BLMP has been striving to do, again, like most of you relate, when you move to a new country, there's that sense of belonging that you always have, trying to find people who understand your story, people who understand your identities. And it was really important for us to come together and as BLMP to make sure that we provide that space. So one of the ways that we are resisting and showing up for our communities is, one, by creating the space for people to be able to meet other Black queer folks from different countries with different stories and be able to feel like they have a family here. That's why we have what we call our local chapters, right? In New York, in the DMV area, in Minneapolis, right? In different places in California, there are people who get together and they have community, they know that they have family there. And also, we also have programs like the one that I co-lead with my amazing co-organizer, Miki, which is called Fierce Freedom School, which is basically a political education, an online political education school for Black trans women and Black femmes as well, where we come together, we teach each other about the political context, what are the tools that we can use to show up for ourselves, to organize, and to make sure that we are creating the change that we need and cultivating the leadership within our own communities. Right, that's also another program that we have. We also have what we call Malaika Network, which is really centered on also focusing and building the leadership, again, of our Black queer migrants who have gone through the process of being in detention or have been in those scary situations of trying to be removed from this country. And now for us to have this program that says, okay, come together, let's assist you in developing your leadership skills. What do you want to do? How can we assist you to fight for what you believe in? Those are all ways that we are trying to show up and resisting and have proven to really be really showing fruits, right? And also part of our deportation defense as well. We've been fighting to get people out of immigration detention centers. We're freed Zaza, the case of Zaza, right? Again, I spoke about surveillance once you go into the immigration detention center. And Zaza is a trans woman from Jamaica. She was in detention center for the longest, maybe 10 years, if not more, right? So for us to have been part of the efforts that fought for her and for her to be released, that was also like a win. That's also another way that we are showing up and resisting. And also just again, I spoke earlier on the power that we exude and we show when we come together. Even when we talk about the horrible conditions at Kakuma camp and the campaign Free Block 13, right? There's a group of organizations that came together and say, hey, we need to highlight these experiences. We need to make demands. So to also be able to be part of those efforts as an organization, as an individuals as well, that's a very powerful way of resisting, right? So when we come together now, we're able to make these demands and apply a new term that I just learned through a training that I was going through, to apply what is called team pressure, to say, as a collective, what are we pushing, right? And in this case, to be able to push and say, when it comes to the conditions and the horrible environment that our folks are existing at Kakuma camp, what are the demands that we are making? What do we want people to know? What are the dangers there? We've already known that there was fire that happened. People have been beaten. People have been attacked. We have lost lives in Kakuma camp, right? All those horrible things have happened. So what are our demands for things to change, right? Can we put pressure for UNHCR, CRORC to say, can you be able to do action that we can see? Can you ensure that our folks will be safe? Can you move these people from these spaces? Again, before you can move people to a place of safety, you need to care. And so far that care has not been shown, right? That's why people have been making all these demands and crying, and action has not been done. So as a collective, these are the demands that we need to make. Say, can you move these people to a safe place, If you put them in a safe place, what does that look like? Can you ensure that you can give them security that can guard their safety 24/7? So those are some of the demands that we are able to make when we come together as a collective. And I'd say that's a very powerful way for us to be showing up and showing resistance.
I mean, fantastically said. Just well done. Because obviously political organizing is important, and those massive wins you've mentioned. I think just coming together and creating a space where you can be yourself, like unedited, like that in itself is also important. The point you made about meeting people who look like you, who can relate to your experience, because that really that speaks to our intersectionalities as migrants, as refugees, because although we're all refugees or asylum seekers, we do come with various identities, whether with gender and with sexual orientation and all those things, needing a safe space where we can organize and feel safe and feel empowered is so important. And to add that with the political wins and demands you're doing, is just amazing. So thank you for highlighting everything you've said, Chiara. Annie Marie, hello. So in what ways are we resisting and organizing to keep our community safe? And I'll go to talent.
Yes, Daniel, thank you. Like we've heard of political activists for centuries. We've heard of political struggles for centuries. This is what it is supposed to be, even with LGBTQ campaigns. Like, we don't need to give up. We have to fight until justice is served, until we are also seen as humans in the communities. We are not supposed to give up. We have to keep on the struggle, not coming and go. That no, we've not achieved what we want, let's go. No, we are not supposed to give up, because I'm not the only one who is going to stay. You are not the only one. There are still young people coming, and we need to give these people support. They need at least to find us somewhere, not one day someone, a young one, saying, no, I cannot be this. You see, we need to keep the struggle. Now, like the struggle, a person, an activist like me, a defender like me, I cannot do this alone. As my fellow colleagues have talked it about, it should be a collective. We should join our energy. We should join our muscles. That is when we are going to win. For example, I'll give you an example. Like UNHCR is a human rights organization. But if honestly, other organizations see there is violation of power within that organization, they need to do something. They're not supposed to sit back. No. Now, I'll give an example. The Block 13 campaign has been there since 2020, ever since. But to tell you the truth, how many organizations have come out? Yes, they come out, you talk to them, they listen to you, yeah. They go to talk to the UNHCR. They tell all the lies they want. So they come back and say, no, this issue is complicated. What is complicated? The way people are cut, the way fires are being set on people's houses, or the way women are being raped. Nothing is complicated. For human rights, it doesn't mean that, oh, this is an LGBT or not. No, these are human rights. These are human lives that we are supposed to fight for. The well-being of people, no matter where they are. So to me, I believe if we join our hands as organizations and fight the violation of power within an organization that is well known, that it is the powerful of all those human organizations, I think it will do some good. It will put some change in one way or the other. Because you cannot tell me people are crying for help. They are crying for protection from one year to the other. And these people come out and say, no, we protect them. If you are protecting them, why are they still being violated at? So these are things that we need to look at. We are not supposed to sit back. We need to stand. Join our efforts. That is when we are going to win this. Because a lot of people are still suffering. A lot of LGBTQ people are there suffering. And many of them are suffering under the organization that is expected to protect them. It is really unfair. So my call is with these organizations, let's just join hands and fight the injustices. As my colleague Gilbert said, it has political or whatever, but we need to fight this. A human rights defender is supposed to fight for someone's human rights. For our young generation, at least to be proud. They need to be proud to be who they are. We all along we've been fighting, no, come out of the closet, but how do you expect a young child who has seen all these Block 13 issues to come out one day to tell the truth? They will not, because they are scared of what is going to happen to them. We need to give these people courage. It is us, we need to be the best for them to stand and be proud of who they are. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Anna-Marie. Yes, the struggle continues. We need to keep fighting, not just for those who are here, people coming behind. And you're right, it's fighting for that visibility, for the representation, for the rights, for the space. And I think it's how we fight in various forms. You know, I'd like to think of activism. I think it's different, you know, the person protesting on the street, the person creating a space, however form we feel most safe and comfortable with, very, very valid. But yes, fighting has to continue. Thank you. Gilbert, I see you're raising your hand, but I'll go to Talent quickly, then I'll come to you before we wrap up to take Q&A from the audience. I'm just conscious for time. Talent, do you want to go?
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I've noted with concern the relationships between our governments and the church. Honestly speaking, the church has done a lot of damage to the LGBTIQ community. And for us to defend our rights, we need to engage the church. Let the church go back to its mission of being the voice of the voiceless, preaching love. The church has been discriminating our members. So the only way I think we need to do is to bridge the gap between the LGBTIQ community and the church. Let's educate our church members. Let's remind the church leaders of their mission. I understand the church is well respected in Africa. If you note where is the church, where there are political leaders, there's always the church. So if we start by convincing the church to go back to its mission, we preach love for all. We are the voice of the voiceless. By bridging that gap, I think we can come up with something. Leaving the church aside will not help us much.
Thank you, Talent. I agree. I think whilst the church has been a healing space for some, it's also failed massively a lot of us who are of the queer community, and that's true. And I agree. I think the church just needs to humanize our community, and that gap, we need to bridge that gap. Whether in educating them or calling them out, whatever it is. But I agree with your point. Thank you so much. Gibbet, I'll go to you quickly, then I'll take questions from the floor because we would have to wrap this up in about 10 minutes. Go on, Gibbet.
Thank you, Daniel. I wanted to pay my respects to Pan-African ILGA. The whole world that has come to create this conference. In organizing to keep our community safe, it would be absolutely unfair not to recognize this tremendous effort that has brought us together from the different walks of the refugee processes and has brought us together. I would like to set this as something that can be emulated. I want to challenge everybody that is listening. What PAI has done and the consortium organizations that have come together to do this is a starting place. What will happen is we need to take this fight from, the Zoom to the actual people that need the fight. But I wanted to highlight that in organizing and defending our communities, if you look at the criteria of what most organizations, LGBTIQ and human rights say they defend, we actually qualify. We have all the characteristics of whom they say they defend. We are Africans, we are LGBTQ, and we are not safe. We need human rights organizations, LGBTQ people to come together and rescue the LGBTQ refugees in Kakuma and the other places in Africa, in South Africa, where murders are happening rampantly. We need to see this taking off. If we qualify as those you have set out to defend, please defend us. We are dying. We are dying. Let's take the fight from these virtual spaces into real places. Let's see the defense. If we do qualify to be defended. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Gibbet. Thank you, Talent. Thank you, Tiara. Thank you, Annie-Marie. I'll now move on to our audience questions. I have two here. So I'm Carlos Pinheiro. Apologies if I didn't pronounce that right. From Brazil, we're watching the amazing conference. Good. And shout out to PAI and organizations that have brought this together. Well done, huge work. So I think this person's question is, I would like to ask about the real influence of American Christian NGOs in homophobic laws / lobby. How they convinced that the LGBTQ community would be a new wave of neo-imperialism. So I'm trying to shape that. Does any of our panelists want to take that away? Let me read it again. One sec. I would like to ask about the real influence of American Christian NGOs in homophobic laws. Okay. How they convinced that the community will be a new wave of. All right, who wants to help us with that question? I think the influence of American Christian NGOs in homophobic laws, how they've impacted homophobic laws in African countries. That's the sense I'm making of that question. Tiara?
Yes, sure. I think the question is, have they influenced?
Oh, wait, let me.
So I'm failing to get the first part of the question.
It's quite loaded. How about the real influence?
Oh yeah, the real influence. Okay,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
So yes, the real influence is definitely there, right? Because you look at it, because when you look at the backlash, and oftentimes I always tell people here to say, I was about to speak in my language. I always tell people here to say, whatever happens here in America, as long as it pertains to LGBTQ issues, it has a reaction to what happens to LGBTQ people in African countries or outside countries. For example, when America passed the marriage equality, right? There was so much backlash even in Zimbabwe, but we were not even fighting for us to be able to marry each other then. So, but there was so much backlash just because they felt like they needed to counter and to show people in Zimbabwe to say, this might happen in America, but this will not happen here. And also you see the narrative of saying, especially for healthcare, right? They receive funds from the US. And also part of those conditions that come is to say that the accessibility of healthcare needs to be equal, also extending to LGBTQ people. And for countries that are well known for criminalizing the existence of LGBTQ people, they don't take that very well, right? So the American Christian community or institutions have really done a number on pushing that narrative to say, this is how America is penetrating in your countries, because now you have to play according to American rules in order for you to get aid. So for example, if you look at Zimbabwe, our healthcare system is deteriorated to its lowest. So they need money for them to be able to build hospitals, to maintain them, for us to have medications in Zimbabwe. But if they're going to receive money from America in order to do those things, and America is saying part of the conditions of you receiving our money is you need to make sure that also LGBTQ people can have fair treatment when they come to seek healthcare services, right? So all those things, they are very much pushed into the narrative, and that has also caused so much homophobia in all these other underdeveloped countries, as I would love to call it. So definitely, yes, there is real influence when it comes to that narrative. So now whenever they see gay people, they automatically translate it to being a Western thing, and then also pushing the narrative to say, well, America won't give you money unless if you're supporting homosexuality. That also tally together, and they definitely use that to fuel homophobia.
Yeah, and it's like two elephants doing their thing, and it's the grass that is suffering because it's queer people at the receiving end of violence that comes from either way. No, that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's why you find Mugabe was also very popular for standing on the stance to say we would rather go hungry and our country would rather suffer before we accept those conditions from you to embrace homosexuality in our own country. It was also being fueled that narrative of saying you have to embrace homosexuality in order for you to get
which tries to dispel the idea that being queer is African. It's just problematic. Yeah. So I think there is influence, but a very unhelpful one. Yeah, thank you. That was a loaded question. So I think this second one, unless other panelists want to add to that, I can just go to the second question. How can we get documents to get LGBTI refuge here in Uganda, as we have many members of our community? All right, so how can we get documents or supporting documents? I'm taking this to be to get LGBTQI refuge in Uganda. Who wants to take that? Talent, Anne-Marie, Gilbert? Anne-Marie. All right, Gilbert, are you there? All right. Okay, so I think, okay, go on, Gilbert. Thank you. Thank you for coming to my rescue there.
Sorry, technology is something that I'm trying to forge a bond. It has been very homophobic to me. Basically, the documentation, I hope I've got the question. I don't know whether it's to take them from Uganda to somewhere else safe. The last part was not very clear. But you see, worldwide, there are few entities that are allowed to move, humans. And these entities will include, of course, like UNHCR. There are some organizations that can directly work with governments, for example, and move these individuals with the assistance of the International Organization for Migration. So these documentations must be obtained. If you intend to take them somewhere, you must find a way of getting them there, first of all, and then register them as refugees. They must be registered into the refugee system. And those are the documents that allow you to move them. And they give then mandate to UNHCR, to International Organization for Migration, and other entities now to be able to help. So if they can be registered as refugees, and to register that, you must be out of your country. So these are the prerequisites that they play within the registration system. I hope I have understood your question, but that's how the registration works, or else you need to take them out on visa, in which case they would need documents issued by the Ugandan government.
No, thank you. And I think local NGOs on the ground hopefully can even help with those sort of documentation. It just helps you understand the process much better. But thank you, Gilbert. On to the third and last question. Let me just read this. I would like to ask about the refugee-led organizations and emerging networks that are struggling to get visibility and funding. Have you contacted them for this seminar? And is there going to be some follow-up so they can talk about how they are organizing? So I have a list of organizations here that have put up, that worked with PAI to put up this session. But let me go to the panelists. Are there organizations you think are struggling and need visibility? And then I can just read the list I have, and then we'll wrap this up. Let me go to talent. So maybe a list of organizations you're aware of, and then we'll just go from there. Talent, are you there? All right, let's go to Anne-Marie. Okay, Ciara. Oh, okay, go
on. Like for now, our case, we've been working with a number of organizations, and they have been so helpful in pushing the campaign. Organizations like JAZ, BLMP, GENE, Triangle Project, we've been working together for a while now, trying to push the campaign somewhere. But still, we welcome other organizations because, as I said before, we still need voices to be raised. We need people who can push our voices, and it cannot be 2 or 3 organizations. Even still here in Nairobi, there are some organizations who have been working together to see that this campaign can be a success and to see that LGBTQ refugees in Kakuma can be rescued. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Ciara.
Yes, I think there's a few that have been in communication with BLMP, but I don't know them from the top of my head right now. But I also definitely know that there is one in South Africa that is led by Zimbabwean trans men. And I think it's called Fruit Basket, I think. I would have to confirm the name and reshare with everyone. But yeah, there are some that I'm in contact with, but I just don't have them off the top of my head right now.
No, no problem. Thank you. I'm going to read the list I have soon. Gilbert. Gilbert fighting with his technology there. Okay, let me.
I don't know my lack of technological know-how. Of course, there are a lot of institutions that are well-intentioned that would like to, create change and are limited. I know a number of them, for example, in Kenya, we have Center for Minority Rights and Strategic Litigation. We have a lot of them, even in Uganda. Besides Sexual Minorities Uganda, there are other institutions there that are trying to help, but that visibility. The thing with the world of activism is that people can choose to ignore you if they think you're not relevant. And usually when they do that, then it becomes less effective, because with activism is that you call for change. And this only works if somebody is listening. So if somebody is not listening, it becomes a challenge. Yes, just like Chair said, I don't have, but yes, there are institutions like this. And as to whether there will be a follow-up, forum where this can be highlighted, really, I think that would be up to the organizers.
All right, thank you. Thank you also very much. So I'm just going to read out a list of organizations that have helped put this together. I have Jazz Southern Africa. I have House of Guru Miley. I have House of Rainbow, Triangle Project, Block 13, Kakuma. I have People Against Suffering, Oppression, and Poverty, so pass up. I have Global Interfaith Network. I have Black LGBTQIA+ Migrant Project, BLMP. And I'm gonna plug in Living Free UK, of course, why not? Panelists, this has been amazing. I have a last question. Should I take this question? All right, I will just take this and we'll get one person to respond. Because I've been told Reverend Jide and Arnold want to each speak for 1 minute to say a few words. How do we join efforts for the #FreeBlock13 campaign? Annie Marie, do you want to help us with that? How do we join efforts for the Free Block 13 campaign? Annie Marie, are you there? Okay, if not, we can now have Reverend Jide to say a few words, and Arnold to bless us for a minute, and then we'll wrap this up. This has been productive. Thank you all so much. Reverend Jide. Okay, can we have Arnold, please? Can you guys hear me? All right, if not, this has been amazing. I want to say thank you to Gilbert, thank you to Tiara, thank you to Talent, thank you to Annie Marie. I've learned a lot. It's been a huge privilege and an honor to listen and facilitate this panel. So where should people find you? Where should people find you? Let me go to Gilbert. Where should people find you and your organization?
Thank you, Daniel. This has been a wonderful platform for me. I will directly answer your question, then I also give my closing remark. I am a refugee. I am a human rights defender. trying to stay alive in Kenya. Unfortunately, when you speak about the injustices in the refugee system, you become a special target. And it's not just me, a couple of human rights defenders in Kenya that are basically trying to survive day by day because of the kind of advocacy that we have engaged in. I would like to conclude by saying thank you, for example, to Pan-African ILGA, GIN, the Victor Mukasa Show. It has led the struggle against Kakuma. Actually, when you mentioned some of these institutions that are coming up, it comes to mind now. The Victor Mukasa Show has been fantastic in raising the challenges that are happening in Kakuma and could use more visibility and funding as well. So I'd like to thank everybody that has come together. Reverend Jude is here, House of Rainbow. We have everybody that has pitched in to make this work. It is a great honor. But as we serve together to protect our communities, I think we need to keep in mind that a lot of defenders are in the firing line. Human rights defenders that are refugees are specifically very vulnerable because the system is used to persecute them. We have already lost a human rights defender, LGBTIQ human rights defender in Kenya. I saw him with my eyes as he was on fire. We cannot afford to let this happen. We need to protect our own. I have had the criticism leveled against, for example, Victor Mukasa. How can we sacrifice our defenders who have proven over the years that they have integrity to the African LGBTQ movement? How can we easily forget? We need to be more proactive. Well, there's a lot of protection. I'll tell you, Daniel, I do not qualify, for example, for protection grants in most institutions just because I'm a refugee. We need to look at refugees as human beings. It's simply a status. It is not a disability. And all the provisions that we put for human rights defenders, for other people that need protection should be, we are still treating people as unqualifying of social amenities because they are simply refugees. So please, thank you so much. You already have a team that has been doing fantastic work in elevating the LGBTQ struggle in Kakuma that constitutes of a number of fantastic individuals and organizations. You're welcome to join them and help rescue people. People are dying down there. It is a mess. Thank you, PAI. Thank you, everybody that came together. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, panelists, for sharing your experience. We relate.
Thank you. Gilbert, quickly, so where can they find you on social media? Are you able to share that? Your handle, your Instagram, are you on Facebook? Are you on Twitter? Or your organization, if you don't want to share yours?
My Facebook username is Gilbert Kagara. I'm not well acquainted with the other social media platforms.
Okay.
But yes,
that's fine.
If you talk to Just Associates, you'll be able to reach me. If you talk to PLMP, you'll be able to reach me.
Okay.
I work very closely with them.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Tiara, closing remarks and where we can find you and any plugin.
Sure, definitely. Thank you, everyone who partnered to make this event happen. This was definitely much needed. And yeah, and also just to make sure that if you are not plugged into the efforts to do actions for Kakuma and Free Block 13, please make sure you get in touch and make sure you're also part of the solution as well. Like I said before, there is so much power when you come together and we apply team pressure, my favorite new term. And yeah, if you want to get in touch with BLMP, definitely, if you want to email us, our email is tribe, TRIBE, as in tribe, my tribe. So it'll be tribe@blmp.org. If Ola, if you can help me, write it in the chat. So yeah, our email is tribe@blmp.org. Our social media handles are all official @officialblmp. So definitely if you go on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and you look for official BLMP, one word, you will find us on all social media platforms. If you want to get in touch with me directly, my email is tiara@blmp.org.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I would go to Annie Murray. Hi, Annie. Closing remarks and where we can find you. Any plugin. Hello.
Thank you again. I'd like to thank everyone who has made sure that this conference comes. We are really so appreciative. Thank you very much. It has been a pleasure, honestly. Still, I would like to call on each and everyone. Your ideas, anything you can do will be helpful to serve the LGBTQ people from Kakuma, because the suffering is still going on. It is still going on. On my Facebook, it's Nalugwa and Mary Josephine. Instagram, Nalugwa and Mary Josephine, and Twitter, and Mary1. That is, I can find me. Just a Triangle Project, Jean, Victor Mkasa, all those people, I work closely with them. Thank you so very much.
Thank you. And your smile, Annie Mary. Oh my God. All right, last but not least, talent, closing remarks, and where we can find you.
Thank you so much. I'd like to say to my fellow members of the community, let us not forget to pray and to work. We should not look for solutions from other people, but it all starts with us. We are the artisan principles of our vocation. Let's depend on God. Let's not forget to work and to pray. You can always find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Alphonsus Makanga, and at PASOP offices in Cape Town, also at the parish of St. Anne's, Anglican Maitland, here in Cape Town again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. So Reverend Jide is back. Hi, Mama Jide. Hello.
Hi, honestly speaking, I think, you know, the conversation is very well received. I don't want to add to the conversation. I just want to say hello to everybody and thank you so much for coming along. And let me just highlight one more organization that everybody should be a part of, and that's the Global Interfaith Network, you know, that looks after the issues around sex, sexual orientation, and gender identity. I mean, all your conversation today is very valid, but I think we must do one or two things moving forward. We must have an action plan, because those who come against us have a lot of money. We need to have a game plan. We need to have a better plan. We need to have a communique to be clear about what we're asking for. We need to intercept or at least work with all the mechanism, the African Court of Human Rights, the African Court of Justice, you know, the United Nations Universal Periodic Review. This will be part of our challenging platforms as well, where we can challenge governments. And let me just say one thing, you know, as a reverend myself, as an Anglican priest, I believe that until we decolonize religion, it will be still difficult to decriminalize, you know, a lot of the laws that are used against us. But above all, I want us to come together. I want to acknowledge Reverend Talent. I mean, please, all of the reverends in the house that I have not met personally, please contact me. You find me on social media, Jide Macaulay, you know, on Twitter, on Instagram, and Facebook. Please contact us. You can register with the Global Interfaith Network. This is a platform that can bring all of us together. We have a lot of work to do. God is calling us in this time for people of faith and none. Please, let's work together. And I want to say thank you to Daniel. Daniel, thank you so much for taking on this mantle. It's been great. And I want to congratulate everybody that have been part of this amazing team. God bless you all.
Thank you, guys. This has been a pleasure. And yes, it's been an honor speaking to all of you. You can find me on Instagram, Danyomi, and please follow Living for UK on Instagram and Twitter. Yeah, see you around. Be safe and have a good time. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, guys.
So thank you, everybody. The next session, which starts at 4 o'clock, will be here. So if you're intending to stay for it, then you can just stay here. And we will start again at 4 o'clock. Abraham? I can't hear you. You're like so soft. And I'm on the Swahili channel, so.
There we go. Still quite faint, still quite faint. Yes.
That's better. That's so much better.
Yes.
Now we can hear you.
Shame. I also only noticed quite late.
Yeah. Okay, well, hopefully we'll just tell people about the interpretation again when we start. And so if there are people who need Swahili, they'll then switch over.
Yeah, we didn't have any complaints or anything, so that is good. All right.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'll also pay attention. I'll also pay attention to it to let you know if it's audible. Sure. Perfect.
Sure. Cool.
Great.
Thank you so much. Asante. Okay, that's interesting.
I am jealous. I'm very jealous.
I'm going to take a short break now.
Cool, cool. I'll be here. Yes, we'll be starting in 10 minutes time. Sure, I'll be here.
Hello, everybody. Love your picture, Ola.
Hey, hey.
Hey, Ferris. Hey, Felicity. Hello,
Hi,
hello,
Kumi.
hello.
Hey.
Maud.
I'm just checking to see if there's any more registrations. Doesn't look like it. Hi, Paris.
Hi, Tony. How are you?
All right, and you?
Good, good. Yeah.
I'm going to start recording again.
Okay, when we start.
Well, we're going to start soon, and I'm afraid I'm going to forget. So
I'm under attack. Yeah. We all good?
Yes.
Good. I can't find lipstick. Hola, good.
Hey, folks. So I'm hunting down our Swahili interpreter. And I've shared the question, Pumi, the one I shared with you. I've also just shared it with Faris now. Faris, it's very long, so let me know on chat. And it's just for the end of the session when there's a bit of a lull.
Okay, okay.
All right, so I'm here, I'm in the background. I'm going to find Kenya, Swahili.
Let's see, we have Sally, Ralph. Okay, goodie. Goodie. 4 o'clock on the dot where I am sitting, which is the time for our start of this session. Before we proceed, let us do a couple of announcements as a way to say welcome, karibu, karibu sana. Bonjour. We have interpretation. I think it makes sense for the French person and the Swahili speaking person to announce the interpretation than me doing it in English. Can I ask our French interpreter to please announce the French interpretation and the button to press?
they are muted.
On the other device. Or someone please type that if you need French interpretation, please go on the globe and look for the French button. And to click that, then you will be able to receive simultaneous interpretation in French. Equally, if you would like to follow and understand the conversation in Swahili, please press on the globe at the bottom of your device and choose the Swahili interpretation. Thank you. I'm announcing this in the English colonial language. Welcome everybody to the second panel on in our conversation, looking for a place to call home, where we will be largely focusing on institutional responsibilities and particularly lifting the United Nations human rights, the United Nations High Commission on Refugees, their responsibilities as an institution tasked with giving many of us a place to call home. Before we start, we want to reiterate that this is a space that will not tolerate any violence of any form, be it transphobia, homophobia, biphobia, lesbophobia, racism, xenophobia, ableism, sexism, homophobia, any other form of oppression. This space we want it to be a free space where we express ourselves safely, where we respect and recognize the oppressions and the multifaceted manner in which experiences are going to be shared, and a space where we value each and everyone's lived experiences. And therefore, anyone who violates these principles will be taken off the Zoom gathering by the host. So welcome. My name is Pumi Mtetwa, and I am very honored to really be in conversation with amazing activists, human rights advocates from across the globe to speak about this very pressing issue. I work for Just Associates, and I'm the regional director of Jazz in Southern Africa. I also have a very long history with ILGA. I'm a former Secretary General of ILGA, and I'm very happy to return again to facilitate this conversation in such a timely way during the PAI conference. Our sister organizations joining in co-hosting this conference is the Block 13 activists in Kakuma, Triangle Project, the Global Interfaith Network, People Against Suffering, Oppression and Poverty, the Black LGBTIQA Migrant Project, House of Rainbow, House of Guramail, and of course, Just Associates. And many, many other people who are allies and friends, part of the collective that has particularly been accompanying Block 13 for the past year and a half. Welcome, everyone. Before I introduce my colleagues and comrades who are going to be speaking about this subject of the role of institutions such as UNHCR, I want us to pause for a minute to think about why we want to lift these responsibilities of institutions. What does it mean when many of the issues really raised in the previous panel that laid the foundation for this one lift the issues around the ideas that our lives as LGBTIQ people who are refugees in desperate conditions are disposable? What does it mean to be regarded as a surplus person? What does it mean for an institution to hold the multiple misinformation that actually dismisses the lived realities of refugees and asylum-seeking people? What does it mean to really play politics, play a ball game on the lives of people who are in desperation? What does it mean when the cracks in the system do not respond to the real reasons why the systems have been created in the first place? And finally, what does diplomacy mean? What does diplomacy mean when actually diplomacy and trade agreements and the transactions between the state institutions and multilateral institutions are completely ignoring the very mandate by which they have been established? And many other questions, colleagues and comrades. But with me today to explore some of these questions is Faris Kuchi, Maud Goba, Ralph Guth, and Sally Gonda. And apologies if I have mispronounced, I tried to practice. But colleagues, I want to first start with Faris. Keeping in the frame the very question of the responsibility of an institution, but share with us through your own life, your own journeys in terms of where it started, what type of institutional accompaniment did you receive, where were the failures in what you received that landed you up where you are right now, and what does it mean for you to be there with or without institutional support? Faris.
Thank you, Pami. Well, it's I'm from House of Karamaile and originally from Ethiopia. And through my activism work in Ethiopia, I had to be in a safe space through that work. And my personal experience, for instance, was the institutions, for instance, UNHCR, as both me and my co-activist and co-founder of the organizations that was activizing back home. Our experience with UNHCR is very unfortunate, to be honest. For instance, one is from being accessible, also for us to access the informations and also what we should do, and also to who we talk to, and all of these resources being accessed. And mind you, we are an activist with an experience of really approaching institutions and organizations that claim to secure sanctity for queer people, and it was really very difficult and almost impossible for us to access that information and those people who also are in a positions to secure our safety. And then on a second level also, as we also navigate and try to manage, and also the kind of sentiments and also context we've got also was to the point more trauma driven, you need to just present all this catastrophic reality that we faced, or for instance, in our collectives, to the point people need to be harmed, need to be killed, and all these kind of horrible stories to happen for them to make an action. And then also some of my colleagues also had to just take a temporary decisions and go to this third country, because for instance, even if as an Ethiopian, even if Kenya is not a safe space for queer people, comparatively, in a very sad way, it's better than Ethiopia. And also to access the UNHCR camps and all this kind of work that has been provided for bodies that are displaced, and how also some of my colleagues also being received in Kenya is also a very sad and tragic stories. And then we all know also what is happening with Camp Kakuma, and to what level also these bodies that are in a positions to help are sensitized enough to understand our problems, and to understand the experience that we go through, and also
to the potential risk and same traumatizing experience we potentially would face when we are also pushed in one spaces together with the bodies that are conditions and beliefs that, like, you know, we are a demonized body because of our sexual orientations or gender identity. So comparing to the mandates of these institutions, UNHCR, for example, and to what is happening on the ground level is actually, like, you know, light years apart. And the implementations was also not practical and not saving queer bodies. So that is my experience.
An unfortunate experience, Faris, but thank you so much for sharing both, you know, the governments and the UNHCR. Maud, I want to come to you and ask you the question in terms of like what we know and we understand around the responsibilities of institutions, UNHCR, and as you introduce yourself and you lift the types of services that you have had to provide because of these failures.
Okay, I'm Maud Goba. I am a refugee in the UK. I also work for an organization called Micro Rainbow. We provide support in terms of safe housing, social inclusion, and employability support. So in terms of the UK, the challenge that people have is the abuse that people experience, which is the experience of many LGBTQI+ asylum seekers around the world, abused by other refugees, abused by people in the community. And there really is a lack of specific housing, specific support, because even if somebody seeks asylum, the same as we hear with people who are in the camp at Kakuma, they are with other refugees. The challenges are still the same, challenges of poverty, trying to find somewhere safe to be. But additionally, because of our sexual and gender identities, then there is that challenge of other people, you know, turning against us and, you know, abusing. So there is need. That's why we started our project in starting our safe houses. There was need to protect those people from abuse. You know, they are meant to be, or we are meant to be safe, the same as other refugees. We've all come to seek safety, and yet here we are in a country where we're supposed to be safe, relatively at least, or, you know, to at least be at peace, and there is none of that. There's still abuse. So we started our safe housing project to ensure that people had safe accommodation and were safe from abuse. And then in terms of the social inclusion part of things, people, even as we speak, I'm always conscious that, you know, we become asylum seekers and refugees. People forget that we're human. We take away that humanity of people who, in the end, become so isolated. You're far from home. You're in a space where you don't feel safe. You've left everything. People have lost their partners. You've gone through this trauma that, again, you have to be repeating in different spaces and being re-traumatized. You don't have any connections, any links. You know, the connection that you need to other humans is you're disconnected and you are on your own. So there is a lot of social exclusion, there's a lot of social isolation. So that's something that we need to be really aware of to ensure that we support people. The journey doesn't end there. The support that asylum seekers and refugees need is not only the important one, obviously, is safety and housing. But after that, the social inclusion and what happens afterwards when you get your status, you're still in a new country, you still don't have credit background in that country, you still don't have links in that country, you still have to navigate the job market, you still have to deal with the trauma of what happened. How do you move on? Who supports you to move on? Who supports you to integrate in this new community, to make links, to make home of the place where you are with such a background of loss?
Thank you so much, Maud, for that. I want to bring in Sally here in navigating systems. UNHCR, the state institutions, and the type of support your organization gives, and you being legally trained. Can you introduce yourself and make these linkages in terms of your work as well? Welcome.
Thanks, Pumi. I can try and make these linkages, but I don't know if I'll do it justice. My name is Sally Gander. I'm the head of advocacy and legal advisor at the Scalabrini Center of Cape Town. We're an NGO that has several programs. The one that I head up is the advocacy program. We engage in high-level policy advocacy, in legal advocacy, so rights enabling litigation. We also have a law clinic, and we do research and communications advocacy. The center itself has a number of other programs, for example, an English school, an employment access program, a women's platform, which is for anyone who identifies that way. So, and I want to be very clear about that, because it was something that I made an assumption about once when I thought about the colleagues that I joined, a wrong assumption. And then we've got a program that offers university level education to refugees as well through, it's an online degree program with the Southern New Hampshire University in the United States. Yeah, so in my role as head of advocacy, I have to navigate some systems, and it starts, I think, with the client that walks through the door and asks for help, and they're either wanting assistance in terms of documentation access or in terms of a map of the asylum system in South Africa, where the barriers are, where the backlogs are, what's needed from them at different stages. But it could also be needing assistance in terms of rights access, and so that's where someone's being thrown out of their house, potentially because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. Or it's someone who doesn't have a home and they're trying to access some type of shelter or accommodation. So it starts there, and then we try and use those experiences to feed into the higher level types of advocacy that we do, whether it's kind of a systemic barrier that needs to be addressed through litigation, or looking at it through kind of high level advocacy, parliamentary advocacy, etc. Approaching institutions, they're difficult to approach. The Department of Home Affairs, because we've litigated against them so many times, they don't like us, and so it's difficult. I have some colleagues who have developed individual relationships with individuals at ground level at Home Affairs, and we use those relationships. We all acknowledge that that's not how it should be. But there's an expediency to it that is often needed in order to get someone the things that they need to carry on building their lives in South Africa. So that's the one. Scalabrini is not a UNHCR implementing partner. And so the way that UNHCR works in South Africa is that they do their work through implementing partners. And we've always made a very conscious decision to not be, because it does allow us a bit more independence in our work. I think that, yeah, we'd have to ask one of the implementing partners about their experiences. But for us, it's very useful to be able to go to them and speak to them almost as equals, kind of trying to do work rather than as a funding recipient. And I'm not going to take too much time just in this introductory part, but I'll say that through that, we have had successes, including South Africa is viewed as a safe country by the UNHCR. We don't have camps, and I say yet because of the way that the policy direction is going. But then at the same time, we have even South African citizens who have successfully claimed asylum elsewhere, who are on the basis of sexual orientation and gender identity or expression. So I think we have to be very careful about what is meant by a body like the UNHCR when they say this is a safe country, because safe for who? I'll stop there, and we can come back to any of those points at a later stage. Thank you for me.
Thank you so much, Sally. That is a very loaded question, right? Safe for who, in so many ways. Now, Ralph, I want to bring you in here and to particularly lift, as you introduce yourself and the work that you do, how I think most of us as LGBTIQ activists have put so much reliance on the law. But in particular, you know, how do you lift that in your work as you think about navigating migration and refugee status?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And thank you for this quite big question. Let's see if I can answer that on at least maybe a basic level. I don't know. Let's see. So
just tell us who you are and where you work.
So my name is Ralph. I work for Queerbase here in the city of Vienna, Austria, Europe. And we are a very small, independent activist organization by and for queer people. And I can only repeat, or I share a lot of the things that Maud said and Sally said as well, because the issues are the same for us here in our experience as well. So, for example, one of the biggest things that actually led to the creation and foundation of Queerbase was the question of safe housing in the aftermath of 2015. So Queerbase is only 5 years old. We started in 2016 because there was the experience that queer refugees in Vienna did not have access to any safe housing. There was no safe space for queer refugees. There were only big camps with the policy of bringing people together from the same nationality, which for queer refugees meant they were, you know, living with in most cases with the people they were running away from, you know, the conservative or homophobic or transphobic people from their country of origin. This was especially hard for trans people, and up to date, this happens on a regular basis that non-binary or transgender persons are at risk and danger in the accommodation. So this was why Queerbase was created. And what we offer is mainly social counseling and legal counseling. And I'm the legal counsel at Queerbase, so I will focus more on the legal aspect. So what we do at Queerbase is we offer counseling, support, and also legal representation during the whole asylum procedure, which means with power of attorney, going with people to their asylum interviews, representing them in front of the court in an appeal procedure, but also do a lot of research on country of origin reports, you know, write statements. But another big aspect of that is actually making sure to work with the people who come to us to make sure that they know their rights and know how the asylum procedure in Austria works, because no one ever takes the time to explain this to anyone. And also to sit down and talk about their lives and what happened to them. So to make sure that they have found their voice and express the most horrible things that have happened to them in a way that quite homophobic and transphobic authorities here in Austria will accept and will grant them asylum. So this is the thing that we navigate. And I would say that both what you asked about the law and also the question about institutions, in my experience, what I've come to understand is that what I'm basically, or what we are doing all the time is fight heteronormativity. And both institutions and the law itself are heteronormative. And that's what we kind of are up to all the time. So what we do is in the legal process, but also outside in advocacy, try to get rid of stereotypical ideas about sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, to even make it possible for authorities to understand the fates and the lives of the people that are sitting in front of them and asking for asylum. Because when we started, it was really shocking to read some of the decisions back then, only 5 years ago, of people wearing denied asylum based on really horrible ideas of sexuality or gender identity. So just to give you one or two examples, we had cases where gay men from Iraq were denied asylum because the one was not gay enough. Like, you know, the person in charge really wrote the decision saying he was sitting there normally, dressed normally, had no makeup and no jewelry. So he was not gay enough. And just 2 months later, there was another negative decision saying that this person is not gay because he was too effeminate, and he was just pretending to be gay because he was so effeminate. No one really is that way. So he's just faking it. So, you know, and these are the kinds of things that we were dealing with, and also sexually explicit questions of, you know, horrible stuff. And so this is the fight that we do, and we do it on 2 tracks. We do it in the courtroom and with statements and with arguments, and we do it with advocacy. We have trainings now for the judges at the court. We train decision makers here on a national level. We train other organizations who offer legal support. So yeah, that's the work we do. And the interesting thing is that UNHCR has a very different role here, but maybe we can talk about that later.
Yeah. We will zoom into like how each one of you have experienced UNHCR where you are. Ferris, I mean, that last point from Ralph about, you know, the decision to say you are not gay enough, I want to link it to what you were saying about this notion that you have to be like this victim traumatized and build from the previous panel that, you know, you have to be cut and destitute. You have to even be dead, as some people were saying, before you can be recognized as like, in what have your experience been in terms of like some of these things the UNHCR officials versus the institution have put in place, the barriers they have put in place, the hurdles that you know of and you have had to cross yourself to get to where you are right now?
It is like, you know, to very much degree of level is like, you know, for me, excuse my language, it goes into also this trauma porn that, like, you know, you really need to perform this kind of like, you know, being traumatized and everything, so that, like, you know, what you're asking to be seen as a dignified being, and then what you went through is enough for you to just, like, you know, as Ralph was saying, like, you know, to just single-handedly 1% to say, like, you know, oh, okay, you are worth to be saved. And it's really like, you know, personally, as I go through, like, you know, I'm also like consider myself as a privileged person because of my work. I get to access so many resources and so many peoples, and really, like, you know, rally themselves when I was in danger to make sure that, like, you know, my safety was guaranteed. And that has, like, you know, a level of privilege. And even for me to go through of this process of, like, you know, looking for institutions that are like, claim they're like, trying to save lives, and also like, with a mandate also to like, with a mandate and report and success report saying like, we saved this amount of people, we provided all this information. To be in front of those bodies and really like, plead my case was the most dehumanizing experience I went, because as an activist, back home, I'm femme, non-binary person that really navigate the world in a very peculiar way on daily basis. And on top of that, when you're activized and politicized of who you are and for your peer as well, it adds so many levels of danger and really so many pain. And then like, I was like, really driving and getting a lot of energies and power to navigate day-to-day life in Ethiopia. But it was so difficult for me to plead my pain in front of all these bodies that are supposed to automatically recognize this pain and also try to secure people and say like, and wait for them like, to say, you are worthy enough to be saved. You are worthy enough to be secured, was one of the most really dehumanizing experience. And this is also like, a message to also the bodies that works also on these areas. It's like, how difficult it is for us to really be in that vulnerable, insecure space, and yet again, and then to wait unbounded time, like, to whatever amount time that you have no idea of, and really see whether you are, you're going to be saved. We're gonna really like, galvanize all the resource that we have and then try to save you. It's really very difficult, and really like, puts you in a limbo positions, whether you should be visible, whether you should also like, voice your pain, whether you should stand up for yourself or not, because it was such a limbo space to be in. And I don't think there is a concentrated checkpoint and also sensitizations work that is being done on these institutes. I don't think the majority of the bodies that are in positions to make this decision, one, are equipped enough to really understand these situations, and two is also to what degree level also they are free from this queer prejudice. Because oftentimes we forget these bodies on the institutions that are functioning and really passing decisions are part of the society that really, like, as Ralph said, like, really synthesized and conditioned by this heteronormativity, patriarchic, and white supremacist system that we're living. And just because they join these institutions and then have some sort of list of mandates and job descriptions that they're claiming to do, we automatically think they're like, believe there will be fulfill what they promise, fulfill what their job descriptions is. Yeah. So it's I mean, like, in my experience, there isn't any that much of like, checkpoints that is these institutions are held, and also the bodies that hold also these positions as an individual level are held, and also, and then like, there isn't any also like, synthesizations, systematized work that really conditions and educates people to unlearn all these heteronormatives preconditions.
That's one need for sure, Ferris. Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to pack a question flowing from what you've said for Sally later around UNHCR and its partners. But to ask Maud, it seems like we keep doing the work of the state and the work of institutions, right? And I don't know how many funding proposals you have to write to do what the state and organizations like UNHCR should be doing. But when you think about what Ferris says, like the broadness of human rights organizations that are tasked with safety and protection of refugees, to what extent have you experienced partnerships and support with them?
Okay. I think, first of all, I wanted to say to Ferris, I feel the pain in what you're saying. I was almost in tears just thinking of those experiences, because it is a re-traumatizing experience, and it's so dehumanizing that sometimes you forget who you are after going through such experience. And then in terms of partnership, I think over the years, people are becoming more aware of the issues that LGBTQI plus asylum seekers face and refugees. There is a lot more advocacy by organizations, by partners, by charities, NGOs, activists, queer individuals, and people with lived experience like myself, like Ferris, like a lot of other people who are using social media to speak out about their experiences, to bring to fore some of these different issues that in, for example, the UK, that we see more compared to, say, in the last 10 years. It is, I guess, still unpopular. Before it was, we were an organization that was working with migrants, which is not popular at all in the first place. And then asylum seekers, that's just a lot of xenophobia around that. And then who are LGBTQI plus, that is an added there wasn't a lot of support either. The LGBTQI organizations didn't know what to do or didn't know how to support asylum seekers and refugees, and the refugee community organizations didn't know how to support LGBTQI plus refugees. So there we were in the middle with no one to really tend to. But nowadays there's a bit more engagement, there's a bit more cooperation, there's a bit more referral, there's a bit more people asking how can we support, or how do we support, or at least referring back and forth. But it is still a challenge of people falling through the cracks of support. There is no one to really understand those challenges, or people are thinking that there isn't any support in the refugee community organizations, so, or at least they're forced to hide their sexuality when they're in this space. You have to be almost a different person. I remember when I was going through my journey of asylum, in spaces where I was very religious, in my Christian space, I had to be someone else, to get support there. And within the LGBT community, I had to be someone else to get support there. And then in this space, I was someone else also. So it's like all our identities are sort of separated into different spaces. And one thing we also forget is we are still, for most of us, different colors when we come to, other countries. There is racism to experience. That is always such a shock. That was a shock for me when I arrived in the UK, because I'd never experienced racism to such an extent. And that was, and that is still also there in the LGBT mainstream community. So it's another additional challenges that people have to face. But I have to be honest and say that things are changing. There are a lot of engagement between organizations, community members coming forward to support. For example, when we open a new safe house, we often do a call out on Twitter, or in different spaces about furnishing their house. We put in Amazon wish list, and members of the community do send us things to furnish the house: kettle, toasters, bedding, different things like that. Some ask to volunteer to help in setting up the house or the upkeep of the house. So there is a lot more awareness of the challenges. So we are all still perhaps learning from each other pretty much in the sector.
Thank you, Maud. A sense of community amidst so many pains, struggles, and trials, right? Thank you so much for that. Sally, I'll come to you with my question again. Like packing a bit on the partners of UNHCR and their roles as you have experienced them in South Africa. Most of them are humanitarian. How have they shown up, and how do they show up in even holding their partner to account?
Sure. Look, I think it's a bit of a difficult question for me to answer, because I know activists at those organizations who push back and have discussions with UNHCR as their funder, and find other ways of doing things that maybe UNHCR wouldn't fund them for. And so I think that is one way of showing up, is to continue with your activism, continue to push back and to speak out in those closed door sessions that one has with your funder. I'm not in those sessions, but I do know that they happen. And yeah, I'm thinking of one person in particular, and I'm not going to name names here, but I do know that this person is known to others here with respect, and is a good activist who does push back to the kind of the difficulties of having to kind of play the role of an activist organization, and an organization that's trying to advance rights, but at the same time, one of your major funders is UNHCR. And I think, look, I mean, it's a reality in this sector that you do need funding to do the work. And so if you can do good work with funding from the UNHCR and continue to push things forward, and to have good people in those organizations, then I think that's a win. It's not as much of a win as I think we all want. But it's, as Maud was saying, there are these small steps that are beginning, and that we're seeing in different spaces. And yeah, I would like to see things move faster, but as long as they're moving as well, that's what's important. I do want to go back though to something that Faris has said, and that Maud amplified, and it is this, I sit in a position where I do hear people's stories, and it's I think it's so important to reiterate it again and again that that one of the roles that someone in my shoes has to always remember is that dignity, dignity, and that the person who has come to you for assistance, even to hear Faris saying, this person you've chosen to save this person. I mean, I will certainly reflect on that, because it made me feel uncomfortable. But I'm grateful for that feeling of discomfort, because it shouldn't be about being saved. And it shouldn't be that someone is sitting and that they're only becoming their story of trauma and asylum. That we're not seeing everything else, and I think that there is a danger, and it's a big criticism I have of the legal field, in that when you have to represent something on paper, it becomes extractive. And you're extracting these things that you know will make the legal argument. And you cannot forget the dignity and the human that is there as well. And so it's a journey that everyone has to walk. And unless that journey is kind of walked together in a reflexive way and a reflective way, then we're not doing things well enough. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Ralph, I want to come to you, flowing beautifully from the way everyone is in conversation on the issue of being dehumanized, and often a notion, you know, when we hear it's complex, that suggests that LGBTIQ people need special rights. In your view, do we have an international legal policy framework on which we solidly stand on to call for accountability from our states and the UN agencies in their multiplicity, not just UNHCR, that allows us to advance the agenda of refugees and asylum seekers?
I would probably have to say no, we don't have that, and we are in dire need of having that. I think in my personal experience, I would say that these fights are being fought over and over again in every single case, in every single asylum application, because that's what we do when we sit in front of a judge in a courtroom, to make sure that, as Sally said correctly, that the dignity of this person is being valued, that this person is being seen for who they are and what they need. And it's a single struggle all the time. And I think, there are some international mechanisms, but they're not, of course, not strong enough. So, for example, I think one thing that is very, very important for my work are the guidelines by the UNHCR published. There is this one particular guideline on asylum applications based on sexual orientation and gender identity. And these guidelines have a very high legal authority in every member state of the Geneva Convention. So also here in Austria. So whatever is in these guidelines, and they are really well written, even though they are 10 years old already, we can use those, and we can sometimes use them as a legal defensive shield against certain questions or practices, but also as a toolbox of finding arguments that strengthen a case. But I don't see that there is a very strong international mechanism for helping our cases.
Thank you so much, Ralph. We have a lot of lobbying and advocacy to do, right? Please do write your question on the chat box, any comment and reflection on what the colleagues and comrades are sharing here. And I'd like to invite really anyone. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, particularly in this round, but to broaden our discussions with this first question, and really anyone can pitch in on this one. The question I have in mind, flowing from even the previous panel and everything that you have said, if one of the guidelines or one of these complexities they tell us about is we consider on an individual basis, but here we are presenting basically a case study that says people who are LGBTI living in countries that criminalize them face these conditions, and therefore you have to think about, the magnitude. In your experiences, how do you reflect on these? They tell us there's over 1 million people, and now more so given Afghanistan, of people who need refugee status. How do you reflect on the justifications that are given and not to fast track applications of people in danger? What are your reflections on the justifications that you've heard? Like, we have a long list, we have to wait for the countries. Anyone can really take this one. Ferris, I see you.
No, I just wanted to also say, I mean, one of the justification is that are being always, like, you know, on and on again, being voiced is, how the global north is really taking a huge number of refugee influx, but in reality, that's not true. Like, you know, the most highly populated refugee centers and also countries that are accepting bodies with an experience of seeking asylum or refugees are not in the global north, right? They are in Africa, Uganda, Kenya, Ethiopia, and you name it. And like, you know, Turkey, these are the countries that are really, like, you know, taking in so many bodies that are seeking asylum or being displaced or with an experience of refugees. And there is this media way of framing the effort, both from the states and from the international organizations that are, like, you know, the global south, the global north is really taking care of this, and it's too much, and it's really a lot, which is completely a lie. And also, like, you know, another justifications is also, like, you know, that are being used as like, you know, sanctifying and really, like, you know, making the global north states as, like, you know, states that are really value the human lives, but in reality that's not true. The life that is being valued in these states are, we know, who are adjacent, who are cis white men, and also adjacent to that, right? So that's also another lies that are being used as a justifications. And other justifications also, like, that are being used is also and also, like, you know, how these states are really, like, funding and channeling money to these efforts to secure peoples and to give dignities. But we know in reality, the majority of the money goes into the administrative works of these agencies and institutions, rather, like, to the individuals that are need to be saved as well. So, like, I would just mention a few of this, and then maybe come back again if I have something.
Thank you so much, Ferris. We've heard those justifications, right? We've heard them. Anyone else wants to add a justification you've heard?
I have one for you. This is not in respect of LGBTQI individuals, but it's in respect of family reunification and a child who is unaccompanied and needs to, and the state where the parent is said, because the parent's salary wasn't high enough, she is not able to have another child with her because she has 2 children with her already. And so I think, I mean, that's something worth reflecting on, just in terms of how different states look at the taking in of asylum seekers and refugees, and the justifications they use that are absolutely absurd. I mean, this is a child that is at high risk of statelessness, but this very well-respected state in Europe will not budge. So yeah, I mean, that's one. I think one of the other things I want to draw into this conversation, you mentioned Afghanistan, is the securitization of migration. And I think that the conversation, I don't want to go to that kind of side of things because it's a whole other conversation on its own, but it certainly plays into kind of justifications or reasons why states will not assist persons of concern. And then the one final one that Faris mentioned, funding and the administrative or the cream taken off the top by these large agencies. But I think there's another one, and it's kind of the flows of funding that are used by governments, by the EU, in order to build walls. So by investing in South Africa, we will make South Africa more attractive, so that instead of an upward flow, there's a downward flow on the African continent. And I think we need to think very critically about those funding flows in the form of aid, etc., because there is an agenda behind it that impacts everyone. And I think that the ones that that pay an acute cost for that are LGBTQI persons who are criminalized. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Sally. And for me, it brings back a conversation, or rather what we were invited and yet we were left out of the doors when Kenya was discussing with the UNHCR around the shutdown of the 2 camps, you know, and that whole discussion. And it's something that keeps coming up when there's a crisis, right? When there's a crisis in relation to whether it's us raising our voices in relation to Kakuma. But of course, we know that there's money involved there. There is money involved in relation to, you know, what comes from the international community to the Kenyan government that enables the camp and so on. But in the previous discussion, if I may move, please, Maud and Ralph, feel free also to let's be in conversation. In the previous discussion, to balance this this discussion and these issues that you raised, Sally, John Manel raised the issue of more and more we have to think about what are we doing locally to ensure that there isn't a need for migration, or let's not say migration, let's say displacement and refugee or asylum seeking. What is it that needs to be done at you know, home level, like where you, what you regard as home, where you live? I imagine this can tie in with like the bills and the legislations in Uganda that make us run away from Uganda. But what is it that really civil society needs to balance against in relation to, one, we deal with UNHCR, but also we create conditions that are safe for people not to be displaced? What is it that needs to do? Because we need to strike the balance, right? And recognize like the limitations of each, but work there. When you think about it, what is it that we can do? Maud, happy to see you unmuting.
Okay. I think I can speak from my experience perhaps of Zimbabwe, really. The first thing obviously that comes to mind for everyone is, you know, decriminalization. But as we know, decriminalization doesn't really resolve all the issues. If we're looking at South Africa, you know, the raping and killing of lesbian women, and all these crimes against trans people, gay men, and anybody who is queer and does not fit into, you know, heteronormativity that we've been speaking about. So really, I think while it's important for us to start decriminalizing, the important thing is to start the dialogue with people. You know, we have to change the hearts and minds of people. Otherwise, we will continue to have people feel threatened and to leave their home, because the issue is not only the criminalization, is decriminalizing, changing the people's minds and hearts, educating the people, advocating, you know, really doing the work on the ground, which I know a lot of activists in Zimbabwe and many countries are doing, and they need the support, obviously, with their guidance on how we can keep moving forward to tackle some of those sensitive cultures, because, you know, culture is one of the things that is always used as, you know, we don't want to change our culture, or this is against our culture, this is against our religions. Are we engaging those cultural leaders? Are we engaging those religious leaders into conversation, into how can we influence the public? How can we engage the public to seeing queer people not as people who are coming in to change the culture, or kind of really take away or kind of adopt this Western culture as they think it is? How can we start from there, and how do we support? And while we're still there, how do we make people safe at home? You know, how are we ensuring that people are not left out in employment? Are we including them in healthcare? For example, trans people, I think we spoke about that earlier. Is there, you know, body affirming healthcare for them? Is it available? Is sexual healthcare available? Mental health support? Are all these services that are available to every citizen, are they being made available to queer people, even if we're decriminalized or not? There is a lot of work, and I'm glad to know that you know, a lot is being done, but we really need to stand in solidarity and to support each other in that work, in trying to win the hearts and the minds of people, in our cultural leaders and our religious leaders.
Fabulous. The society that we want to live in. Ferris, go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I completely agree with what Maud said. But at the same time, also, it's also like earlier also when Sally was saying, like, you know, dignity in our works and in our activity that we do on daily basis, it's really very important to really remind ourselves. But as we remind ourselves also, we should also really work hard to give the autonomy, the bodies, to define what dignity means for them. You know, oftentimes we talk about dignity and then we define it how that dignity look like for us, and then we expect other people's to conform into it. And it's very important that, like, you know, as we work for dignity of human, and the ability to define how that dignity look like should be on that individuals, and that need to be respected. That's very important. And then also, there is a huge amount of informations and knowledge and resources that are being actually produced by grassroots level activists that are trying so hard to really, like, you know, affirms the safeties and securities of LGBTI bodies. That data is very valid and it's very important. And at the same time, also, there is you know, as we all know, the UN agencies is very vast that are collecting so many data. UNHCR is collecting one sort of data that are, like, you know, on peoples that are being forced to be displaced, and the other agencies are collecting so many, like, you know, on the education aspect of it, and food aspect of it, on all the different aspects of our humanity. And it is absolutely very important to really collect all these data and use these data as a knowledge to really build an imaginative, and the world that we're imagining to the world that we're living, and using these informations and knowledge really to push government bodies that are putting policies and legislations that are criminalizing the way we love and the way we really express our genders and our identities as a queer body. And all of this works as we do also, it is absolutely, again, very important to remind ourselves again, the ability to define for a home for one person should be also to be on that person. Because also, again, this idea of like, we need to create where they are is safe is also being used to really stop and force people to move from one place to other places, right? So it is with that knowledge, it is absolutely very important to galvanize all these perspectives and knowledge and data and create really like, at the end of the day, a very safe space for people to live wherever they wanted to live as a queer body without hesitations of expressing themselves. And if they did, without thinking they would be killed for it. Because, I like, even with my own personal experience, I've been fearing for my life when I was in Ethiopia, and I'm still fearing for my life here in Austria as well. So it's, the idea of like, also us, going from one places to another places, we will secure safety. And then it's really like, when we define, do we really like, in this world that are really like, infested with this very oppressive, heteronormative system, do we really secure that safeties? And how do we secure that safeties? Or are we working to create a softer space where that harms happens, where we galvanize our resources and ourselves and really create a softer space for us to really land in a safer way when that hurts happen? So I think it's very important to really like, questions and really analyze all these resources, informations and datas, and then also willingness to work and really give autonomous and really kill the necropolitics of systems that really deciding these bodies need to be die, this body need to live, this body need to be empowered, and all sorts of that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that, Ferris.
Can I jump in?
Yeah. Just this. Can I just ask you to just, I'm going to give Sally a moment, but I would like us to, all of us, to hold what I think also Ferris is lifting, and Tiara in the previous panel lifted, the romanticization of the North as like this beautiful paradise to arrive to. But particularly, I want to hold what Ferris is saying, because there's an emphasis of fighting heteronormativity, but in that we lose the allness of what Maud was saying, like, I'm not gonna chop myself like to be, now I'm with Christians, I have to be like this. Now I'm with Black people, I have to be like this. Now I'm with LGBTIQ people who are mixed, I have to be like this. But how really do we hold the multiplicity of ourselves as subjects, even in a place that we hold that we fight hate related to LGBTI identities? But what about the other issues, and how should they be present as we challenge systems of oppression in their multiplicities? Sally?
Thanks, Bumi. So there were two things I wanted to just quickly throw into the discussion. The one was related to your question, and it was just around how I acknowledge that I think there's value in creating safety wherever one is, and ensuring that happens. But we also have to make sure that this is probably not the best way for me to say it, but the burden of teaching the unlearning is not with someone who is going to be in danger, and is not with, and so it is not with the oppressed person if they are oppressed in that situation, whereas like they have an unoppressed identity somewhere else, and I want that to be very clear as well. So if we're trying to make somewhere safe, it's not just about people there making it safe and taking on that burden and that responsibility. It's about me contacting the people I know in Parliament in South Africa to put pressure on, and it's about you contacting kind of this activist. You know, there's got to be more of a concerted effort, but one that is very strategic and planned, and we need the space to find that, but also to be led by people without placing a burden on them to teach that unlearning. So that's the one thing that I wanted to say. And then I wanted to just go back to something Faris said on data. It's a discussion I've had, and so some people that know me will kind of recognize my words here, around the discomfort with the collection of data, and the research and the magnifying glass for the LGBTQI community, because I think that data is important and research is important, and can be used in wonderful ways for advocacy, and to make change. But again, we need to also think about and make sure that it's done in a way that recognizes the dignity of the person in the dignity that they see, as you said, Faris, and the way they understand it. And sometimes I worry. And so I think there's a responsibility there to have those conversations and bring up those points as well. Those were the two things that I wanted to just jump in there with. Thanks, Pumi.
Thank you so much, Sally. My question still remains, but I want to say something about the data issue. The comrades in Block 13 have been collecting data, as far as I know, for the last year and a half, at least, that I've been involved in the campaign. They are the subjects and owners of documenting their lives and presenting it to the UNHCR. You want to guess what UNHCR says about that? I'll let you ponder on that, right? If these are like owners of it, they present it. But Ralph, I want you to speak about how we romanticize going to your country.
Well, I actually, that's a good point where I wanted to jump in anyway, in the question of what can be done and all the amazing ideas, because there I think the question of asylum comes back in, right? Because if we have people fighting for human rights, queer activists, there must always be the possibility that, you know, they are protected if something goes wrong, and if they are not successful in changing the world or the society, or, you know, so and this was the general idea of asylum, you know, if your human rights are in danger in one place, it must be possible, and there must be, and this would be one demand, there must be safe and legal options to leave and to go somewhere else. And I think this is not necessarily, you know, as one also in the chat said, the US or the European Union, just, you know, to be in another place and get there in a safe way and in a legal way. And at the moment we don't have that. And that's the ridiculous idea, you know, that we have human rights activists. And I think this would embolden people and strengthen them, because if I as an activist know that if things turn, excuse me, the language, to really turn to shit, then there are mechanisms in place that will get me out of there legally and in a safe way. Then, you know, this strengthens my positions and it strengthens me in being outspoken. So I think, and this is the big fault line where I think, especially, of course, the European Union lets people alone all around the world. And even though they claim to be this, I mean, the European Union claims to be this human rights defender or whatnot, but, you know, they leave people alone everywhere. So I think this is the biggest trap, kind of. So, and concerning your question, I don't see it that way. That, you know, that people would be safe in the European Union or only safe in the EU or the US. That's not the case, of course. That's also, of course, an image and a very problematic and also colonial picture. And something that we in our work navigate in a very frustrating way, because we play with the idea of oh, we're so open-minded here in Europe, and you know, the people coming here because they're prosecuted in their home country, even though a couple of years ago in a lot of European countries homosexuality was criminalized. Here in Austria, homosexual men were sentenced to jail because of different age variations than in place for heterosexual people up until 2006, 2006. So, but then we also play with this kind of, also as Faris mentioned, the trauma porn, and now they say finally in Europe, and they need asylum, give it to them. This is our kind of strategy, but a very problematic one. And I hate it sometimes, but it's also part of the job.
If I may, I'm also saying it in the most humble way. I know, also as a queer body that comes from Ethiopia and now positions and also in Europe, I do understand and the position that I play. But in all of these understandings, also it is very important for me to say it here also, not in a very calling out way, but in a call-in way, how also the global LGBTI community in a way that is shaped and present and imagery wise is very wide. And it goes into the contributions of even people being curious back in the continent and wanted to know and really try to accept. We can go to a Google and really Google an image. It's very wide, and then there is an inherited intention in that, because historically we know where the educations and the conditioning of this violence toward the queer body, this violence to the body that lives in a violent way, is which mechanism plays a huge roles. The mechanism of colonizations, the mechanism of imperialisms, the mechanism of capitalisms plays a huge roles, which is instituted and formed into educations by the global norms, power and states, right? So it is absolutely very important also, as we say, these countries and global norms are safe and everything, to really know this knowledge and really question also within ourselves as a global queer community, to really question and really see the imagery of the queerness, and then also move into also to this romantizations of this saving or showing kindness, accepting or even tolerating queer bodies in this global norms spaces, to which body this is reserved, right? Because it goes into also the same imagery I'm talking about. It's to the whiteness that goes into it, because there is the racisms, and then there is also within that also that black body, that black and brown and POC body are not given the same courtesy that to be themselves, to express themselves, to be sexuals and to be gender expressives in these spaces, right? And there are so many works that is being done also by QTB-POC community within this global north spaces that try to really center, that try to brings into this imagery the difference and the multifaceted phases of what queerness means. So it's in a way of like really like, you know, allowing people to just go anywhere and then really live their lives in a way that they wanted to, having also this context and knowledge and really questioning and investigating this reality vis-a-vis this knowledge is very important to secure.
Thank you so much, Ferris. Thank you so much, everyone. And everyone who is listening attentively, I want to pick up on your many, many questions. But really, one question that is this huge is about where the pressure points should be, you know? What you think exactly the message to the UN human rights mechanisms and the UNHCR in particular should be. The regional bodies for this continent, it will be like the African Union or the People's Commission, African Human Rights Commission for People and Human Rights, and the governments. Where should the pressure points be in relation to making visible the realities that are faced by refugees and migrants and asylum seekers? Where should the pressure points be? Thanks for unmuting first.
Maybe it means I can be quick and then I'm off the hook. I'm going to link this question in with Serge's question in the Q&A.
Yes.
Which is around holding UNHCR and its partners accountable. And so I think, look, the African human rights system, we've seen, I mean, I'm sure everyone here knows about the Coalition for African Lesbians and it wanting to be admitted as an observer organization with the African Commission. And I think that there are acts like that one could escalate, that start to provide a type of pressure. I think that we also need to be mindful, though, that, I mean, there's this high level pressure and the bureaucracies that one engages with, kind of when you're putting that pressure on, but how much of it trickles down? And how much of it helps the person who is trying to hold the UNHCR accountable or its partners accountable, like Serge has asked. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that that you can choose one and say, okay, I'm only going to do this one, or, you know, I think that there needs to be kind of multiple strategies. And so I think that kind of bringing in observer organizations at the various African human rights institution kind of mechanisms is a good start. I know that Ralph had mentioned one in our meeting earlier, and I'm going to leave that one to him because I think the decade anniversary, Ralph, is another great one. But I think that we need to also kind of take the lead from people who are documenting their own struggles, for me. And you put that question out there. I don't think it needs an answer because I think we all know the answer, and I think that it's shameful. Mm-hmm. But how do we, in the positions of privilege that we occupy, and they are multiple, mm-hmm. How do we use those to further amplify the data being gathered by people on the ground, and how do we follow their lead?
Thank you, Sally. Maud, a rallying call?
Okay. I think in terms of what can we do and the pressure points, I think that it remains important, like Sally said, for those with privilege too, and those who can advocate for themselves or are empowered to do so, to put pressure on the UNHCR and on the governments and member states who signed to this law to protect refugees, to remember their commitments, and also to remember that LGBTQI asylum seekers and refugees have those additional challenges and they need to be addressed. It can't be that they are seeking safety and they're becoming unsafe to the point of, in the case of Kakuma, being killed, losing their lives, or in a space where they should be safe, where they've run to. We need to constantly put pressure on those governments to remind them of their commitment, regardless of what they think of our identities or queerness. But here is a human you said you would protect, who is in your guardianship, in your country. You are meant to protect them. Do so. We need to keep pushing, in as much as organizations such as ours or different NGOs or activists can pick up the work. Because there is need, there is now, but then there is also need for continued advocacy and continued reminding of those commitments to protect people and to remind them of their human rights and to hold them in dignity. And at the moment, I think it can't be said enough that what is happening is indeed shameful, and it's so dehumanizing that, and it's shameful that people are not protected in spaces where they should be protected. So we need to continue to stand in solidarity, to push, to raise our voices, and to challenge ignorance, even on a lower level. If you see ignorance, challenge it. So that's it. We need to continue to push those who said they would be responsible and offer protection to do so, to remind them again of their commitment.
Thank you so much, Maud, for that. Ralph, you were inviting us to think about the 10th anniversary.
Yes,
what exactly do we do and why?
Thank you, Sally, for reminding me. I probably would have forgotten. Yes, this is just a small addition to the great ideas that are on the table already, and that is the guidelines I mentioned by the UNHCR for asylum applications based on sexual orientation and gender identity were published in October 2012. So next year they will become 10 years old, and I think this would be a good anniversary to demand that UNHCR publishes a new guideline that is more extensive, more inclusive, because the language as it is now excludes gender expression and sex characteristics. And I think there is more, I mean, they are great, but I think there is always room for improvement, for more guarantees, for more safety for people and for the affected people. And the good thing about these guidelines is that they are, as I said, have a very high legal authority in all member states of the Geneva Convention and UNHCR offices globally as well. So, these guidelines are really important. And I think it's not too much to ask to revise guidelines every 10 years and, make them a little bit more inclusive. So this, I think, could be one good pressure point.
Thank you so much, Ralph. Let's not ask, let's demand. Ferris?
Yes, absolutely. Let's not ask, just demand is the policy to go forward. It's also very good to really piggyback what Ralph said also, really to compare and contrast each UN agency's office globally, because there are best practice within even that mandate. So it's why some of the practices of similar mandate are not being implemented into the continent Africa. It's very important to pinpoint that aspect of it. And because also personally for me, also there is a play of anti-Blackness that are playing into this implementations. It's very important to focus on that and put pressure on that aspect of it. And the other aspect that we really need to put pressure on also is UNHCRs or these UN agencies as in their mandate that are working with so many peoples and so many partners, organizations. What are their specific synthesizations work they do to really secure the sanctity of queer lives in their day-to-day work? what are the practices, what are the guidelines, how are they being practiced, and how are they being put in place. It's very questions that is very important, and to really hold them accountable into that. And also the third aspect of it, also in these mandates and in these job descriptions that are, you know, put in place by these agencies, to what level also you put individuals to implement these programs, and to what level these individuals that you put in power are implementing, and how, like, you know, what are you holding, or what are your mechanism of holding these people accountable to really fulfill these missions and visions of your institutions, your agencies, and so on. And like, you know, it might probably comes as personal and really, like, you know, calling out names that are hold positions, but these bodies as an individuals are really, like, you know, keeping so many things, and that really, like, you know, making a lot of bodies that look like me in a very insecure way, in a very not safe way, to the point them no longer being in these realms with us. So it's very important also to really, like, you know, hold these bodies accountable.
Thank you so much, everyone. We are 2 minutes past the time. I can't express my gratitude enough about allowing me to be in conversation with all of you on this webinar. Thank you so much for the comments, the questions that have been posed. And of course, the intention is to produce something out of these discussions that we've had, including what you need as a refugee, where you can go to. And we remain available. We are organizations. You can find, if you find one organization, you will find most of us who are co-conveners of this webinar. Really, for me, in expressing so much gratitude about the discussion that we had, is that in as much as we need to continue to think about the UN agencies and the UNHCR in particular, we also need to chase the money. They are funded by public money from our governments, and therefore we need to hold them accountable. We need to ensure that we really track UNHCR's efforts in country, as we know that they are different, as Ferris has just reminded us. Our experiences with UNHCR in some countries is different in other countries. How do we leverage those relationships within that system to strengthen our campaigns? And of course, this does not necessarily mean, as you have heard, that we leave out the other legal possibilities, parliamentary possibilities that can enable a situation where there is no violence, no hatred, no displacement, basically not being regarded as like a less than human person, being an LGBTI person across the continent. But most importantly, colleagues, comrades, and colleagues, is to look at ourselves as PAI members or non-PAI members who are LGBTI organizations, in relation to what extent are we thinking of all of our people in all of their identities. And in this particular discussion, we are lifting refugees, asylum seekers, and migrants. To what extent are you, as an organization, as an activist, as a human rights defender, coming to the table in relation to joining efforts and campaigns around the world that seek to find justice and peace and safety for migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers? So for me and all of us, big thank you, Faris, Maud, Sally, and Ralph, for being in conversation with us. A big thank you to the co-conveners of these last two sessions, Pan Africa, ILGA, for allowing us to create the space in the framework of the Pan Africa ILGA conference. Of course, Global Interfaith Network, BLMP, PASOP, House of Rainbow, House of Guramaine, House of Guramaile, Triangle Project, Just Associates, and of course the Block 13 comrades who are completely continuing to survive and to really allow us the opportunity to come closer in finding solutions through their experiences and their sufferings. Thank you so much, comrades. Good evening, goodbye, and thank you.
Thank you for facilitating it wonderfully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Pumi.
Tony.
Bye.
Thank you.
Press the
Bye.
buttons.
Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Press the